Everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Proactis Quick Quotes. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Louise Wilkinson. I'm one of the account managers at TSM, working alongside Sarah Mountney, who I'm sure you've all met. Just something to think about before we start today's session on quick quotes. Obviously, getting quotes from suppliers can be a bit of a tedious task. It often feels like there are more valuable ways to spend your time than negotiating what seems like an endless list of suppliers. So the thing is working with suppliers is a necessary part of our business. So it's important to know how to approach the task. Knowing how to get the best quotes from your partners can not only make the whole process much easier, but it can also boost profitability of your business. So just think about those processes, as James is running through the product with you today. So before I hand you over to James, James is one of our application consultants. He will run through the product with you. I'm sure it won't take an hour. However, we've allowed some time at the end to run through any unanswered questions. So please put your questions in the chat. We do have someone that is monitoring the chat box, so hopefully we can answer your questions as we go along. And if not, we'll cover that off at the end. Just bear with, we've got other people joining. So all you've missed so far is the introduction, but I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind turning your cameras off, your microphones off. I'm going to hand you over to James and I will see you all at the end. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today, we're going to be talking about Proactis S2C, but more specifically, the quick quotes functionality. S2C, as you may know, means source to contract. It's Proactis' own supplier and contract management software, which provides a more fluid interaction with your own suppliers, allowing purchasers to get the best possible value from their suppliers. Quick Quotes is part of the S2C supplier relationship module. It functions out of the box, doesn't require any additional setup so long as your suppliers and contract templates are available. What it essentially does is streamlines or expedites the contract setup process, allowing you to quickly fire off requests for quotes to existing suppliers in your S2C suite, or as we'll see shortly, across the entire Proactis supplier network. It also keeps your compliance in check with all the appropriate waypoints in a contract setup process that you would have normally. Quick Quotes, I would say, is more geared towards ad hoc quotes which need to be sourced quickly, as opposed to a 100-page contract. Not that it's not capable of doing that, mind you. Once the requests have gone out and come back, Quick Quotes then allows you the use of this handy contract wizard, which quickly generates and awards your contract to your chosen supplier. So we'll go into all this and more during the live run through. So without further ado, let's begin. And as we're going through, of course, please make sure if you've got any questions at all to drop them in the chat. People will either pick them up at that point, or we'll take a look at them at the end of the webinar. Okay, so we start off by logging into the buyer end of S2C. So from here, we can navigate to the sourcing tab, then onto projects, and then finally onto quick quotes. From the quick quotes homepage, we can see any active quotes as well as any awarded quotes. We can also perform a search up here at the top using a variety of criteria such as name, description, etc. If I want to start a new quote, then I can click the new button in the top right there. I can start this from a previous quote, which I've created already. In this case, we're going to start up a brand new quote. And as you can see, it's got a self-generated number there for our reference quote. So first of all, I'm going to give it a name. We're going to call Dell Laptops, and then we can add in a description. So laptops for office, nice and easy. The last thing we can do on this page here is we can decide whether or not other users are allowed to see this RFQ being request for quote. So I'm going to leave that open for the moment so that, sorry, I'm going to check that so that everybody can see this at the moment. I'm going to click OK. And that's going to bring us into the quote screen. Okay. So on the new quote screen, I can start adding in the smaller details. First and foremost, I'm going to add in a closing date, which is going to be the date at which this quote in particular can no longer be, well, quoted on by your suppliers. So I'm going to provide in closing date of next week, the 19th. If I want to get really, really technical on it, then of course I can add in a exact closing time. I can also add in a delivery date if needed. So, and also, sorry, I can allow suppliers to submit multiple quotations with a checkbox at the bottom there. Point of that, mainly I would say, is number one, so that suppliers can submit their multiple quotations. The reason they might do that is either because they can make a better offer later on once they've submitted an initial quote. If that's not checked, then of course, once they've submitted that initial quote, then that's them done. That's the. So next up, I want to add an item onto this quote so suppliers know what I'm sourcing. If I go to the bottom right and click the add button, I can start to add information about the item. So of course, we're looking for laptops. And in the description, I can add in any smaller item detail. So for instance, if I wanted to, I could add in descriptions pre-built laptops. And also I want to make sure that they've got 8 GB of RAM minimum. Okay, I can then add in my total estimated value of, let's say, £5,000, and I'm expecting a quantity, i.e. how many laptops am I expecting for that money? 10. So it works out to £500 a laptop. So it's worth mentioning at this point that the estimated total value that you add in here, this is for your company only. The suppliers who receive this quote, they're not going to see that the estimated value that you expect. I can add in a unit of measure, but each is fine for laptops. And I also have an additional optional delivery date at the bottom here, which can come in handy for example, if you've got 10 laptops. If you've got 10 laptops, it's going to take a lot longer to source the laptops than it is, say, a box of 10 keyboards, because those are ready, those are prepared. So we can add in a delivery date separately for different items on this quote. Okay. So once I've got that information in there, I can click OK, and that has created my item. So now that I've added the item, I go across to my suppliers, and from this list, if I go down to the bottom and click add, I can then add in however many suppliers I want to send this quote to. So for instance, if I have Dell as I'm receiving, if I wanted to receive the laptops from Dell, I can select that supplier by checking the box at the end and then clicking OK. We can see additional information for the supplier by clicking the magnifying glass there, such as the address and any contact information, as well as company number, VAT number, etc. Once I've selected my supplier and it's gone into my selected suppliers list, I can click OK. Now, just quickly to show you on here, which I think is actually quite a nice feature of the quick quotes process, is I can select from my supplier directory, which is only for my company. I can also select search all organizations. And what this option allows me to do is select from any supplier registered to the Proactis S2C supplier portal. So obviously that's good because it allows you to potentially branch out your main supplier list. If I click search on there, oops, sorry. If there was any hardware items there, maybe not. As you can see, we've got a much larger list for IT than if I searched according to my own list. I only have one page here on all directories. Bear in mind, this is the test system as well, but I have 6 pages available here. Okay, so now that I've added my supplier, I can remove it here, or I can navigate myself to the supplier directory record, should I want to. I can also attach files here to in the Documents tab. So I can add a document from the library, merge from a separate template, etc. So of course this is handy if we wanted to attach, for instance, a much more detailed laptop spec that we're expecting from these companies, from these suppliers rather, sorry. And then finally, we have our access rules. So if you remember when I originally set up the RFQ, I checked the box at the bottom which said I want everybody to have access, and that's followed through to this point here. But of course, I can also add in single users or divisions to have visibility over my quote. So now I've created my quote details, the items and the suppliers, there are a couple of options. I can save it and come back to it later, or I can issue it. So I'm going to issue this out now. And I'm going to get a handy little checklist pop up, which is just going to make sure that I've added the items, the suppliers, and there are contact details available. I can also finally amend my closing date if I want, but the 19th should be suitable. So if I click OK on there, that's now generated my quote. As you can see, we have the issue date, which is today's date, of our quote, the closing date, the status, which is of course issued, and finally we have a supplies quoted bar. So essentially this will fill up accordingly to however many suppliers I've sent the quote out to. Okay. Oh, sorry, one additional thing obviously is I can amend or view the RFQ using this button here. Okay, so now that this quote has gone out, I can log into the supplier network. And this is what the suppliers are going to see when they log into the supplier network from here. I've logged in as Dell, the supplier that I've sent this quote to. And what they'll see is the opportunities tab. If I click on that there, you can see the information of the quotes that they've received. This is our quote at the top here, as you can see, because it's got Touchstone Group written across. They also have a published date, i.e. the date that this was actually created, which is about a minute ago, and the closing date, which is what I specified when I was creating the quote. So if I click on the Show Me button, this then takes us into the quote. We've got a text box at the top here, which will allow us to add any additional information that we might need to. We can also add in, as a supplier, we could add in our own quotation expiry, sorry. And we've also got the request overview, i.e. the customer name, the delivery address, etc., and any contact details that we might need. So as a supplier, I'm going to head to the items tab, and we can see the item from my quote there, which has been generated. If I click the More button there, then we can see the additional description that we added for this item. Pre-built laptops, 8 GB of RAM minimum, sorry. So this is the point at which your supplier can see, as you can see, they've got no idea that on my initial quote, I was expecting a price of 5,000, i.e. 500 for each. They can see that my quantity requested is 10. So let's say that the pre-built laptops were in fact 490 a piece rather than the 500 that Touchstone expected. Quantity requested, we can't amend that because that's how many have been requested. The supplier can, however, amend how many that they are going to send. So they could send 5 of the 10, and that will update the total value accordingly. But we'll leave that on 10. And as we can see, that comes to £4,900. And so that, of course, is £100 lower than we expected on the quote, which is good. So once we've updated that information, we can then go to the attachments tab here if we wanted. And again, we could add, as a supplier, a detailed spec of the laptops that we're providing on the quote, or any additional terms and conditions, contract details that they may wish to share with the customer. But before I submit this quote, I could potentially send, as a supplier, a message to the customer. So for instance, if I just write in laptops query in there, I can attach a file to this message should I want as well. If I click send there, as you can see, what this does is it opens up a dialogue between the supplier and the customer, similar to almost a Teams chat. And we'll look at that in a bit more detail when we get back onto the customer side shortly. If I jump back to my quote response, since I've added my items, I've got no additional information that I want to provide on here. I can validate that. As we know and love, we get that big green box that says everything is good. I can then save this as a draft if I want, and I can come back to it later, or I can submit it. So in this case, I just want to do the submission. That goes out, and then as you can see there, the quote has disappeared from that list because I didn't allow suppliers to perform multiple quotes when I was creating the quote as the customer. Okay. Now I'm going to log back into the Proactis S2C buyer side. Okay. But while I'm on the main page, I'm just going to check my messages up the top here. Now, as you can see, by these two items at the top here, Dell Limited has added a new dialog post to my request for quote. If I click on the Go To button there, I then move to the Dialog tab. And as you can see, I've got a message from Dave at Dell, test laptops query, and I can reply and query if I like, add any documents, files, etc. I can send that back. Just a little note, confirmation that once it's gone out, it's gone out. And as we can see, we get our handy little sing by, sort of like a WhatsApp. And that continues that query for this quote. Now, if I select the, sorry, go back to my messages for one, we can see that the supplier Dell has submitted a quotation in response to my RFQ. These messages, of course, aren't limited to just the app. You will receive, or the customers and the suppliers themselves will receive email communications from the system when these actions have taken place. So if I go to my quote from there, these are my quotations for the RFQ. And as you can see, Dell have submitted a quote with no expiry for 4,900. So what we can do now is if we check the box next to our quote, this is the only quote. I could have had more, of course, but in this case, I've just got the one. I've checked that, and I've got a couple of options. I can view the quote, I can accept the quote, reject it, or start new ones, etc. If I click on accept, as you can see, what this is now launched is what we spoke about earlier, which is the contracts wizard. A couple of options. I can create a single contract, or I can not create any. I want to create a single contract. I then go ahead and select my contract template. In this case, it's going to be an IT template because, of course, it's related to IT, sorry. I can also select a user to check myself there. Store that as a contract manager. And finally, I've got a option at the bottom here, which says create all contracts in draft or automatically move the status of each contract as far forward as possible. And this is what we spoke about when we say that it expedites the process. By selecting this action, the contract will move, as it says, as far forward as it can before it requires any approval or any other editing at that point. Oftentimes, it's going to be safer to create a contract in a draft status. That way, anybody who's actually generating the contracts can jump in and make any additional changes that might need to be made, any tweaks and such. So if I select that I want to create this in a draft status, click OK. A couple more options. I can add further contracts to the wizard, or I can complete my contract wizard there. So I'm happy with this quote and the contract that should be provided at the end of it. If I click finish, I get one more notification saying that it's about to create this contract. Now, of course, because I've selected draft, it's not world ending if I click OK, and I didn't want to at that point, because we can go back and we can amend that. But we shouldn't need to, because the contract wizards and the quotation have taken care of all of that information quite securely behind this. Okay, so as you can see, I've got my little green box that said the contract has been created successfully. If I go to my contracts tab and then onto contracts from here, as we can see, my contract here is now sitting at draft status, and that's awaiting finalization. We won't be covering the submission of the contract in this session, as that's a whole nother session altogether, dealing with the contract side. But as you can see on this contract draft, it's taken all of the information that I provided on the quote, and it's taken all of the information the supplier has provided on that quote, and it's filled in all of that information accordingly for me. If I just quickly check the history on this contract, as you can see, the only history that we have is that the contract was created at this point. There's nothing else further has been done because I created this as a draft. Okay, so I hope that was a helpful session for everybody. So we're going to have a quick look in the chat to see if there are any additional questions.
Hey there, James. So we don't have any questions in the chat, but people, please feel free to bob your questions in the chat right now, or reach out to your account managers, which is myself or Sarah. James, thank you so much. That was really useful, really helpful. I'm sure we will get some questions following the session. Please remember, we have another webinar on the 15th of May. Make sure you keep up to date with what's happening on our webinar page. We'll definitely email everyone with sort of the next sessions that are about to come out. And thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, James.
Thank you.